get our meeting started. And because we don't have quorum, I might go through the Development Corporation first, since that should be a short agenda. With
Quorum?
We do have quorum. I'm saying we're missing 2 members, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to do TCDC first. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Development Corporation for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. And the first item of business is privilege of the floor, and we'll take privilege of the floor for both the Development Corporation and the IDA. I have 1 blue card from Teresa Alt, and I'd invite you to come forward and let us know what you're thinking.
Here. Okay, I guess I can hear it's on. Regarding the conifer building for low-income seniors, I've discussed the question with a couple of others. I've concluded that it should get the requested extension of its pilot as foreseen in the original agreement, despite the vast financial resources of the company. This is also despite the fact that public transportation reaches the building at most once an hour, not very adequate for people who don't drive. In general, when it comes to all housing, probably the rents to be charged should be the deciding factor rather than the finances of the builder, which can be fudged. The rents should be in the contract and enforced. It would be useful to the public if rents were expressed not only as X% of AMI, but also in actual dollars for the first relevant year. The IDA should only support affordable housing projects and, of course, industries that create good jobs. By the way, at the last meeting, I was glad to see that you plan to provide Zoom access to hearings for IDA members, but I was sorry to conclude that you have no plans to publicize hearings in ways other than by the legal notices in a dying newspaper that few people read.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the Development Corporation or the IDA? I see somebody on an iPhone. Are they here to speak to the?
That's Russ.
Okay. Does it look like Russ?
Russ?
Yes, okay, good. Are there any additions to the agenda? And the first item beyond that is business, 2024 draft budget approval. Heather, do you wish to speak to that?
Sure. So every year by November 1st, we have to upload a drafted budget into the state's Paris reporting system. So what we've done is put together a drafted budget based on, what we know to be happening at the Development Corporation over the course of the next year. Of course, as we reach year end, if anything changes, we'll come back and do a more formal or an amendment to the budget in January, February if we need to, but this is really just to get that up in the state system. Just as a reminder, the Development Corporation provides pretty much access to the tax-exempt bond market for not-for-profit projects. Not a lot of uptake on that for several years, so we're not projecting. We don't have any projects in the pipeline, so there's your draft budget for next year.
Okay, any questions or comments on the budget? Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the budget for the Development Corporation? Deborah moves, Jeff seconds, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Are you ready to vote? I'll call Ann.
So was the recent grant, where does that fall into which entity?
So it's projected as an expense for 2023, that $150,000. I'm not certain that they will request the funding, meet all the contingencies by the end of this year, but we will carry it into next year's budget, should we need to.
Oh, I meant to say the 1.2 million you're going to get.
Oh, the $1.2 million grant, our work grant,
Right.
that was to IAED, Ithaca
that's-
Area Economic Development. So it wouldn't
Under
be in the
that entity.
Development Corporation's
Okay.
budget. Yeah,
That's what I was wondering. All right, thank you.
sure.
Okay, anybody else?
And we're talking about the TCDC budget right now.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we're going Development Corporation first today. All right, are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll. Duxon? Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. I do not have a chair's report. Staff report for the Development Corporation. Heather, anything?
I have no staff report.
All right. We have minutes from our August 9th, 2023 board meeting. Could I get a motion on the minutes? Jeff moves, Ann seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none, I'll do this by a show of hands. Approve the minutes. That's unanimous. Great. Okay. Any other business to come before the Development Corporation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. John moves, Jeff seconds. All those in favor of adjournment? All right. Great meeting. Okay. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. Welcome to everybody. And then we just heard privilege of the floor for both. But I will just indicate if anybody else has arrived or wishes to speak to the IDA. Seeing none, we'll continue. Are there any additions to the agenda? Heather.
I'd like to request addition for executive session, one, to discuss ongoing litigation, and two, to discuss project agreement, contract negotiations on an existing project.
Okay. Get to executive session at the end of the meeting. We'll proceed to business. First item is Conifer Realty, LLC, application. And I believe we have some guests with us. Yes?
I'd like to introduce Griffin Wiggle and Kevin Day from Conifer Realty. I did provide a benefit memo on this project. This is an existing senior facility that Conifer Realty has requested an extension on the pilot. The pilot was originally negotiated between the town of Ithaca and the holding company that owns the property, which is, one of those tax credit projects that's owned by Conifer Realty, LLC. And as I alluded to or tried to explain in my benefit memo, the taxing jurisdiction that is in charge of assessing properties is able to negotiate pilots for affordable housing projects in Tompkins County. That would be Tompkins County, not the municipalities. So there's been a move to try and make all of the pilots go through the county. The county says the IDA is the entity that we created back in the 1980s to deliver pilots, so this should go to the IDA. So you will see in your packet that there is a letter to Shauna Black, the chair of the county legislature, sort of requesting this extension of this pilot. It was determined through Jay Franklin and the assessment department that it really should come through the IDA. So that's why we're seeing it. And as you may recall, the first pilot that we did for affordable housing was 210 Hancock, and we did it where we required that they show their net income, and there's a formula that is based in real property tax law that we were using to determine what their payment would be every year. It happens off cycle with the taxing jurisdictions. The number does not change change very much from one year to the next. Usually with an affordable housing project, you know, their ability to increase income is not very, very much, as well as the expenses tend to just increase. They never go down. So after that first pilot we did for affordable housing, all the ones after that, in consultation with Jay Franklin and County Assessment, he said, you know, it would be much easier if you just set a payment amount. Then the taxing jurisdictions know what they're going to get. The applicants know what they're going to have to pay. It's easier for everybody to budget. It's easier for the school districts to budget. So that's what we've done, and we've sort of memorialized that in our uniform tax exemption policy for affordable housing projects. So what I did with this one, rather than just amend or recommend extending the pilot with the existing, what the town had originally done, where you would have to look at their income and identify a payment amount off schedule every year, I just recommended putting it into our standard policy, which is what I did. So you will see the community benefit memo in your packet, and on the last page of that, I have the proposed incentive amount, and I have made it coterminous with the existing requirements that senior housing facility remain an affordable property through 2058. And our policy does extend that kind of benefit coterminous with when the affordability period would end.
Yeah, if I could invite our guests forward.
Yeah, I'm going to invite Griffin and Kevin to come join us at the table.
There's a couple seats together down there. You guys travel as a pack, right?
And if you could use your microphones, about 6 inches away works best. Sure. And if you wish to reintroduce yourselves, that'd be great.
Sure. My name is Kevin Day. I'm the Senior Vice President of Portfolio Management at Conifer Realty.
And I'm Griffin Wiggle, and I work for Kevin at Conifer.
Okay. Heather, did you have more?
I do not. I know that Kevin and Griffin have a presentation, just a brief overview of their organization, so we'll go ahead and do that first. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Great. So like I said, I'm from Conifer Realty. We are headquartered out of Rochester, New York, although active in 4 different states, which include New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. If you go to the next slide. And so, yes, our company motto is a home for possibilities. We are dedicated almost exclusively to providing affordable housing. Currently, we have about 14,000 homes in about 180 different apartment communities across those 4 states. So right here in Tompkins County, we actually have 8 communities, almost 800 apartments. You can see those listed here. Conifer Village at Ithaca is 72 units. It's actually located adjacent to Linderman Creek Apartments, which is a larger family complex with 152 units right next door.
I'm just going to chime in that that's right across from the hospital, right? Yeah, for perspective.
Yep, up on the hill.
No, Linderman Creek is up on Route 79. It's Overlook that at West Hill that is
yes.
across from the hospital.
So
Another one of their properties.
So this is, what's,
It's like up by Eco Village, kind of. Not quite the Eco Village.
oh, okay.
Yes, sorry. And so actually, the overlook
Nice
at
that
West
we know.
Hills, we are planning a significant renovation there with some new funding and subsidy that we're in the process of obtaining. But yeah, Linderman Creek is up on the hill, and then Conifer Village, which is our senior property, is up even higher a little bit behind it. It's not very visible from the road.
Okay, thank you.
So this was constructed back in 2006. and you can see some of these, tax credit properties that we develop are modern, attractive. You wouldn't even necessarily know that they're affordable housing. This property is restricted to residents that it's a mix of households at 50, 65, and 80% of the area median income. And at this property, we serve residents who are on average about 75 years old with a household income of $26,000. Most of them are fixed income Social Security recipients. So we, originally got a pilot agreement for this property when it was originally developed. It does have a 25-year extension because it's coming up for renewal now. And we're requesting that it run concurrent with the affordability restrictions, which would be for 35 years until 2058. So, across our portfolio, with COVID, which affected, residents' ability to pay, and just some really large increases in operating costs, has really strained our properties and affected some of our abilities to just, keep up to our standards of what we want to provide for our communities.
If I could ask, to the question we had during public comment, what are the rent ranges?
So it's about 1,000 to 1,600, and that's right depending on what those restriction levels are, whether it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, and so like each one has a set limit, and those are federal limits that are set. So each year they tell us what we can increase it to, and that's what we follow.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? As I understand it, if you pay more than 30% of your income on rent, then you're rent burdened. So do these amounts of rent that you're allowed to charge, how do they relate percentage-wise to the income levels of your tenants?
So a number of them get voucher subsidies, which actually then they only have to pay 30% of their income. Some of the higher income households, so to speak, I mean, they're still not very high, are closer to that level where it's 30% of their income.
But you don't exceed 30%.
It depends. You can qualify at a lower level. As long as you can pay the rent, you can live at the property.
Okay, thank you.
And so, like I said, right, the pilot is ending now and has an extension in the agreement, but we're just requesting that it run with the same term of those affordability restrictions, and it's those same affordability levels that will run until 2058. And then just for some context, right, I mean, where we've really seen some big increases are on utilities and insurance. Insurance companies have been losing so much money with all the catastrophic, climate events that have been going on that they then turn around and charge everybody else much higher rates. And so our insurance costs have gone up 65% in the last 5 years. And same thing with utility costs, about 50%. And so it's those things, along with the restrictions on the rent that, make it more challenging for us to just maintain the property as it gets older. And without the pilot, we would pay almost double the level of taxes, which would be quite a burden on the property. So with that said, I think we only have a couple slides left.
That's fine.
Oh, a little bit more about the property. Like I said, it's a pretty modern complex. I mean, it's not luxury housing, but it provides, a nice home for 72 families who otherwise would be, hard to afford, any sort of housing here in Ithaca. And I think that's it. Yep.
Questions? Let's see, I'll go down the road. Jeff, go ahead.
Two quick questions. So this is probably for Heather a little bit more. So Heather? Hey, Heather? No problem. Quick question. So on the new formula that you're putting in place for this, what would it do for the current taxes? So in other words, would they pay lower taxes for this coming year than what they did last year? Or is it going to be about the same?
It is very similar. It was like within $8,000 or $10,000 plus or minus, given what they've paid over the past 5 years.
And then, sorry, second question. With the option to renew, was there any terms that were in the Town of Ithaca agreement that we need to worry about, or?
The Town of Ithaca's agreement did give them the option to renew for another 15 years. Or, no, actually, it was another 25 years. But again, when this came to me, it was determined that the towns can't negotiate pilots because they're not the assessing jurisdiction. But they did for many years. I don't quite understand how that is working.
Okay. John?
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Heather, but my understanding is that when the pilot doesn't go through us, it doesn't actually affect all the taxing jurisdictions, right? So has the school district been getting paid full boat this whole time?
No, actually, for affordable housing pilots, the assessing jurisdiction can deliver a pilot that covers
all
just
the
like the
jurisdictions.
IDA, the school district, the municipality, and the county.
Okay, so then, I mean, for all of those, this isn't a substantive change in what they've been collecting.
Okay. Ann?
Thank you for the presentation and for creating affordable housing. I just want to say, second, that anything that we can do to help you, encourage you or support you to do more housing like this in our county, I'm on our Housing Economic Development Committee. We'd be glad to, talk with you, especially on bus lines or, in our nodal areas where there's easier access to shopping and things like that. And I've been to this development, and it's very well kept up, and there's a lot more diversity folks here in this one. So talk with the folks, and the folks I talked to were very happy about it, and they especially liked the ones that had balconies and things like that, to be able to, it's just something that you don't have in a lot of the affordable housing. So a couple of quick questions. I'm assuming, are utilities included in their rents, or is that separate?
Oh, yeah. So, no, it's not included in the rents, but there's an allowance. So we get provided, I think it's by the Housing Authority, how much, the typical utility costs are, and then we reduce the rents accordingly.
Reduce the, what does that mean?
Oh, so if, for instance, like, we get information that says that average electric costs are $70 a month, and if we would charge, $1,070 is what we're told, by the federal limits, then we deduct off the 70 because the tenants are paying that electric, and we charge 1,000.
Okay. And then, so do you get federal subsidies to help augment the rent? You talked about some people have vouchers. Do you get any other federal subsidies on an ongoing basis? No? Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And then just in response to your question about further development, so, two things. One is we're working with Heather to try to get new tax-exempt bonds for the Overlook complex to do renovations there. And secondly, we have additional land that is up behind the Linderman Creek and Conifer Village complex that would potentially support additional affordable housing as well as for sale housing and potentially some retail housing under the town's new zoning plan that they have. You have to be designated as a traditional neighborhood development area, but we're excited about the possibility there.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Deborah.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to support this because obviously we want to do what we can to continue to make this housing affordable. But I just wanted to clarify something. I understand your insurance premiums have gone up terrifically. And I understand the building's aging and you're going to have to do repairs. But you cited the increase in utilities, and from the sounds of what you've just explained to Annie, that increase is going to be borne by the tenants.
So there are some that are paid by the landlord, which includes all of the common areas, so electric and heating for, hallways, community room, office, and all that stuff. So that was the figure that I cited, which is not a trivial amount. I mean, that increase was $30,000.
Over a year?
What's that? No, that was over the 5-year period. And so, right, and that went up from, I think, about 60,000. So, right, so there are owner-paid expenses, and then there are tenant-paid expenses. The tenant-paid is a deduction off the rent.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Heather.
We have with us former IDA board member and current county legislator Mike Sigler, and he was wondering if the chair might entertain a question.
I think the chair would entertain a question from our colleague.
I hope the question is entertaining.
We're going to find out.
No, Heather kind of answered it, because I don't know if this really pertains, but when you were managing Linderman Creek too, this is going to be a senior facility, so this isn't a problem, but in that other facility, there was a crime problem. And I didn't know if that had ever resolved itself, and what you kind of did as a manager to resolve that problem. And I asked partially because we have that same problem with another developer, and I'm kind of looking for ways to fix that, but.
So, right, I mean, so we have a new manager who's there just this year, and I mean, frankly, the on-site staff has a huge role in this. One is in making sure that responsible tenants live there. I mean, that's one of the biggest factors, right? And so, I mean, we're fortunate to have a nice product that people really want to live. And so, not to say that it's not a challenge. I mean, she had a car racing through there the other night. And so, like, there's some things that are within your control and not within your control. And then working with the local police department. You've got to have some cooperation from them. They've got to be interested in coming out and helping to address problems too.
Thank you. Like I said, it's a different project, but interesting anyway. So.
Okay. I had a couple. One is page 20 is where the numbers are. Is that correct, Heather?
Yes.
And so you're saying those numbers in red are the new, or no, the pilot proposed are two above that? So in 2024, the taxes would be $54,655? Yes. And that's roughly what it has been?
Yes.
Okay. And then I just note on page 12 of the packet, the number of units you have in Tompkins County, 655. That's a big number. And as Ann shared, we'd certainly like to be a hospitable community for more development. And if there's stuff we can do to help build more affordable housing, we want to be a partner on that. If I can speak for the IDA, it's certainly a hot issue here in our community.
Right. This is not a cheap community to live in. And but if I can just mention, Heather has been terrific to work with. Both on doing this and presenting this to you guys. And right, we had initially reached out to the town because that's who our agreement was. And they said, oh no, you have to talk to the county. But yes, when we got in touch with Heather, she was very helpful. And like I mentioned, we're also working with her on, working on this other renovation and redevelopment.
Okay, are there any, Todd?
Yeah, I'm just concerned because I know we had the 15-year abatement originally, the pilot program, now another 20, so 40 years. I personally wouldn't be in favor of anything for looking at a 25-year thing. So now we're looking at something that's 40 years. But when you look at all the affordable housing units you have, it's impressive. When you heard the comment you made about it's not cheap to live in this town, with the renovations coming, would you commit to hiring local labor?
That's a good question. That's actually, I'm not working on that development, so I don't know what the requirements are. I could get back to you, because oftentimes different sources of fundings come with different requirements.
I'm just saying because we're hearing the thing about the rent. It's tough to keep the rent affordable here. Yeah. It's tough to live here with the, that would be a huge factor for me, knowing that.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand that. And I don't know if the IDA has, certain requirements or incentives for some of the help that they provide projects.
We do.
Yeah,
We do.
Great.
Okay.
So it's gonna come with that probably. I'm sorry, I don't know the details of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, John?
I just want to point out that this abatement that we would be providing, while the term is very long, it is coterminous with the affordability requirements and also is conforming with the policy we just adopted at our last meeting. So it's not, I think if this were a brand new project if we transported ourselves back to 2006, we were considering it under today's policies, they would have gotten a 49-year affordability period because that's coterminous with the affordability requirement, which is presumably through like HFA with New York State or,
Yep.
a higher power than us to maintain that long-term affordability and the specific affordability ratios that they committed to at the initial project inception.
Had to bring in the higher power. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We must
Okay.
always acknowledge the higher power.
Any other questions or comments for our guests? Are we ready to put a motion on the floor to send this to public hearing? John moves and seconds. Any discussion? All right, I'll call the roll. Duxon?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff? John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we'll send this to public hearing, and it should come back to us probably next month. So,
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. Next item of business is the 2024 draft TCIDA budget, and that's on page 21 of your packet. Heather, do you want to open us up on this issue?
Sure, and similar to the Development Corporation, we are required to upload a draft budget into the state's Paris Public Accountability, I'm looking at Stephen, the Paris reporting system, the Public Authorities Reporting Information System before November 1st. So this is our best estimate at where we will end up at the end of this year and what our expenses may be for next year. Draft budget for your consideration.
John?
Can you talk us through where we're at with specifically the broadband? I had thought that we had added some requirements to that funding, and then that funding was declined, but I'm seeing it still hanging out in here.
There were some contingencies on that funding, and we have internally been able to meet those contingencies, so that funding is still in play. What we did is there's no direct funding coming from Cuba Data Juice. There was initially some match from Cuba Data Juice, so they're no longer part of the broadband project. And our independent service provider that is going to install and operate the line for the dark fiber line has put some language in their operating agreement with us that they will not lease to anyone, to any single entity that that is doing cryptocurrency mining. And we used the same language that Assemblymember Anna Kellis used in her cryptocurrency mining ban so that we could define cryptocurrency mining. The contingencies seem to have been met, and that project is moving forward. We've received all the contracts and agreements from the federal government. This one is going through the USDA, and so we're working through that process now. I was hoping we'd be under construction by the end of the year, but it looks like next year.
Can you share the language associated with that with the board?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff?
Yeah, so Heather, given what we went through with IAED, do we have the ability to put cash into better interest earning accounts to bump up our interest income at all? Or is that kind of tied in with the county where we've got the ability to access it, but we don't have authority over it?
That is a good question. I'm not even going to pretend like I know the answer, but I will find the answer. I will reiterate that, you know, the county does hold all of our funds in a bank account, so I will connect with our attorneys and I'll connect with the county and see about that. Thank you.
$628.
Deborah.
And 2.6 million to be a satisfying number.
5% on average, a lot better.
Yeah, I will say that the county's actually been doing fairly well interest-wise. We've got money spread in various banks and CDs and New York Class. New York Class is paying very, very well. So
Down to the IDA though, huh?
I don't know. I mean, that's something,
they may not have
I would suggest that Heather could contact Lori Scarrett, our finance director, and she would be able to help out. I did want to ask, looking at this budget, do the fees include the MOU payments from the county?
That would be administration, the expense, administration of $467,500.
That's booked as an expense? I'm talking about the money that
Yes.
you pay.
Yes,
That is
that's
an
an expense. The IDA pays it to IAED, so it's an expense.
Oh, okay. So it runs through the IDA. Okay.
Well, it
No.
doesn't include the county.
No,
though.
this is not the county's funding, this is the IDA's funding.
No, I understand that, but if this is the IDA's budget, okay, so, all right, I'm confused, I guess, because the MOU, the money goes to IAED.
Yes.
All right. Okay, never mind. Never mind.
Hey, John.
I think sort of following on, there's a whole conversation with county legislature about what the payment amount to IAED was and should be. I think, the entire time I've been on this board, we've never actually had that conversation as this board. IAED is a standalone entity that, we've effectively contracted for some services and also make a contribution to. And I think that it would be an important exercise for us rather than simply saying, well, the budget that, Heather is our administrative director. She's also the executive director of IAED, and she's prepared this budget. There's a number in it for a contractor or organization. I think we should have a conversation about what that number should be, if there's anything we want to consider in the MOU, et cetera, before we next actually sign an MOU between us and that organization. I don't necessarily think I'm interested in meaningfully changing the number, but I feel like it's as a fiduciary responsibility of this board, like we should have an open conversation about that.
Yeah.
Sure. I can certainly bring that probably next month. The MOU language and a little bit of background on IDA fund balance, IAED, and sort of the history of the relationship between the two.
Yeah, and I think you provided a bunch of really useful information at the county's conversation about that, about the long-term history and the it used to be a third, and now it's not anymore. And, I think there was a lot that went into that discussion at the county that, some of my colleagues on this board were also in those conversations, but not all. And so I think, probably would be good for us to sort of have a similar set of that reporting that you provided with the stacked graph of the different, it's can we at least just make sure everybody's seen that and that conversation has been had here?
Absolutely.
I think that's a good idea, John. Okay. I had a question, the 460,274. How did you arrive at that number for income?
At IAED, what we did is we put together a 5-year budget plan, and it's just I believe the IDA piece is a % increase over the last time, but we've got a 5-year strategy that we have put together, a 5-year budget at IAED, and about a third comes from investors. We are currently in our investment.
My question's different. I'm asking about the income side, the fees.
Oh, those fees. I'm so sorry. Fees, income.
IDA fees.
Thinking about IAED.
460, 274, sorry.
So that's based on projects that we our best estimate as to if they're going to close this year and what their fees are due. So I know a couple of them, like the Stately is not going to close this year. It's not projected in our income for this year, kind of thing.
So you put that one into 2024?
Right.
Okay. And so the Stately's out there, what other projects are you thinking will be in 2024?
We've got 3 VISM projects, only projects that have been approved that haven't closed. So you'd see City Harbor in there. I think that's it, the 3 VISM projects.
Okay.
What about the East 8 project? That close?
Which project on East State?
Blue Vista Ventures, whatever they're called, BVHSS, BVHHS, whatever they are.
Oh, 401 East State Street, you're right. That one has not closed.
Do we have any update on
No.
that?
I apologize, this is Russ, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, John and Rich and board, I apologize for not being there physically. We are pushing to get these people to react and respond, and it's just been, with the economic climate and the interest rate climate, they're a little bit slower than normal.
Okay. All right. Okay, any further questions, comments on the draft budget? Yeah, Todd?
Hey, Russ, will they be assessed penalties for the delay, or?
No, not legally, no. They will not. It's dependent upon, what their timing is, and depending upon the project, what their financing might be, but there's no penalties assessed. After a year goes by, I think we have to go back to the board, just from an optics standpoint versus anything else. In other words, if we induce a project and on January 1 doesn't close by December 31, we should probably go back to the board and have her reinduce it.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay, Deborah?
Well, as long as we're waiting for projects to get their financing, I'm wondering, and you may be able to answer this question better than anyone else here, everything I'm reading suggests that interest rates will stay higher longer and that credit is tightening across the board. And I'm wondering, when we approve an incentive, I assume we do that before the financing is lined up?
I like to do it as they are shopping financing or when they have secured financing. And so sometimes it's seamless, and sometimes, if they come and they say, well, we're not going to be in the ground for 2 years, I'll say, then wait. A lot of times the developers would like to have that certainty and to know that the incentive is part of their financing package. So sometimes the banks will contact me. They'll want to know the likelihood. And every project is a little bit different. What we have found with some of these projects that have been stalled for a little while is really been the interest rate environment, the construction costs, that when they go out to bid them, the costs go up so significantly, and then the banks have sort of pulled back. So they're having these big equity gaps right now.
Concerned that our pipeline may dry up a bit because of the general interest atmosphere and the credit tightening.
I do think we're going to see that over the next couple of years. I think we've seen that this year. The pace at which projects have come to the IDA, particularly the housing and the more community development projects, the pace has slowed. And everyone's just sort of waiting to see what's going to happen.
I'm not the only one that's concerned.
No.
Okay. Anything further, or can I get a motion to accept the draft budget? Jeff moves, Deborah seconds. Any further discussion? I'll call the roll. Duxon?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Next item is chair's report. I don't have a chair's report. So, staff report, Heather?
Okay, I do have the construction waivers that were approved administratively since our last meeting are in your packet. They are 4 waivers for the Dean, which is the Travis Hyde project of 401 East State Street, the conversion of that commercial office building into a residential housing. So I'm providing those per our policy, if there's any questions or discussion.
John?
The fourth one, decided to self-perform, presumably that's a pretty small contract?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, okay.
It might make sense for us to have a discussion about our Labor Committee meeting, because I thought we had a really good discussion on this issue of the waivers and how we wanted to treat them, and some further discussion about how we can encourage local labor. And so that I'd point you to page 23 of our agenda. And we had, as I said, a nice discussion, and we seem to achieve consensus that we do need to have some policy for administrative waivers so projects can keep going, but that we wanted to make absolutely clear that any IDA member can go in and look at the underlying file to see what was requested and review it and raise any questions. John?
I mean, speaking generally, right, our policy is that they have to hit, is it 80%?
75.
75%. You know, as you're considering these waivers, is it, I mean, I've sort of right, I threw out there at the meeting, maybe it should be 100 because the waiver exists. How do you know if it's going to be 75 or not at the point that you're issuing the waiver? Is that even relevant to the conversation, or do you just waive out of the policy and then reduce the 75% by that contract amount, or like how does that play into anything?
We're waiving these out of the 75% requirement. So for example, if you don't have a waiver for a specific trade, you have to overall, all the ones that are not subject to the waiver at the end are going to have to meet that 75% overall. 75%
of the balance. So like for instance, just to like throw some numbers out there, if say this particular project was, you know, $1 million, and these 4 waivers collectively are $250,000, they still have $750,000 of unwaived work. Does that have to be 100% local, or do you then say, actually, you need to have $500,000 in local?
So the local is based on number of laborers, not contract amount.
But the pools are trade specific.
75% of the laborers on the project have to be local.
By human count?
It's not by contract amount, it's by human count. If you recall, we had tracked the number of laborers, the average wages, the average hours every month for several projects that sort of informed this policy. So it really is local laborers. We define local as, you know, Tompkins and adjoining counties. So for example, if they don't have a waiver for their electrical contract, you know, they may end up with a couple of electrical workers that might not be local because they might have a shift supervisor or somebody that, you know, someone's bringing in from Onondaga County and it's not an adjoining county. So there is, you know, a little bit of wiggle for that kind of thing. You know,
Deborah. Go ahead, Heather, finish.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, are the waivers like trades, it looks like they're trade specific, right?
It's in the bid list, it's broken down by the type of work.
So does the 75% apply to all the laborers in all the trades? Or do you evaluate each pool separately?
It's the 75% is all the laborers that are not subject to a waiver.
So
the
it
waiver,
is trade specific.
it is subcontractor specific.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, John.
I'm reading the policy right now, and I think it's actually not clear whether we went 3/4 of the people or 3/4 of the cost, and I think that we should probably clarify that. What it actually says is that they're required to use local workers for 3/4 of the cumulative construction. Cumulative construction measured in dollars or man hours is like two wildly different. I mean, you got a crane operator versus, like laborer working on I think that that's something that we should probably, at least provide some clarity in the policy so that it's not a question.
I've never had a developer or a contractor ask. And we've made it very clear, and all of our reporting forms are clearly laborer. We don't even ask for contract
I guess speaking as a board member who was very focused on this policy when it was adopted, I'm a little surprised we're measuring that way. So I think you've just had a question. Let's make sure
No, John, good point.
It should be answered.
Certainly, all of the information we collected for a very long period of time was individual-based workers.
Well, we also have wage data.
We do have wage data,
So I think that either interpretation could have been in our minds when we passed this policy, and we should clarify.
Yeah, I always thought it was workers, but okay.
Yeah,
But
there was
I agree with you.
lots.
Clarifying makes sense. Ann, did you have something?
I'm not quite done yet.
Okay.
I also think it is important for us to specify, because it isn't specified actually written in the policy, that the waiver reduces the overall burden, and I think that that's something that probably should be clarified, right? Because
that's certainly the intent. Yes.
Well, is it or isn't it? Clearly that particular chunk of work the waiver doesn't apply to, or the policy doesn't apply to. But does that mean that the total burden is lower? And it's not clear to me that that's the case by the policy. And I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be. I'm just saying it should be clear.
Clear. Okay, Ann.
Todd had his hand up, and I'm interested to hear what he has
All
to
right,
say
Todd.
first.
Yeah, I think a better way of capturing it would be with the labor hours or work hours, because that way, because the labor wages don't keep up with the prices of material. So you could have an inflation. So even though a job might cost X amount of money, we hear the developers all talking that materials going up and up and up, but the wages aren't keeping up with that pace. So I think a better way to keep more local people working is to go with work hours. I think it'd be a better way to collect that, to try to get most people working probably.
Yeah, Ann.
So if we did, I guess I'll go off of that, if we did per laborer, per hour of local laborer, is that?
Our labor report, so I'm happy to clarify the policy, but what I'm uncomfortable with is the IDA on the floor clarifying how the policy is implemented. The intent of the policy through the construction laborers committee's many meetings was all about there was significant discussion about, is it wages, is it wage hours, is it labor hours, is it contract amount, and there was a lot of discussion. So I'm going to say that I'm happy to clarify the intent of the policy based on how we are implementing this policy. And the policy is laborers. And we collect data monthly. So it's the number of laborers monthly. It's not a perfect measure. Nothing is a perfect measure. We had lots of conversations. So if this subcontractor reports that they have 10 laborers, then that's 10 laborers. Some of them may have worked 40 hours a week for 4 weeks. Some of them may have worked 20 hours a week for 2 weeks, but we count each of them as one per month.
If somebody's on the job for 5 minutes, they count. If somebody's as the
But
same as somebody who's
overall,
on the
they're
job.
usually not on the job for 5 minutes.
Sure, but I mean, like, that's the point applies, right? It's like that person counts.
So we do look at it over a monthly period. So, laborer Smith might be a laborer Smith, like that person might be a laborer 2 months in a row or 4 months in a row.
I mean, that
Okay.
cuts both ways, because you think about
Yeah.
like somebody like a specialty trade who's only going to be there for a couple of days and they're coming from out of town, that's going to hurt them on the.
Certainly, if we want to revisit the labor policy, and if you have specific language, maybe that's the way to go, is to make recommendations on what the policy should read.
And I would recommend that you send it back to the committee.
Yeah, I think this isn't the forum.
But I think
To do
one of
that.
the really good things that came out of the last Construction Labor Committee meeting was that there was sort of an agreement that, we barely put this policy into place. We have one project under construction, one that is looking to start construction. Like, we haven't even had a full year of implementing this policy. Let's let it see how it works out, at least for a year. And then we might have some information to inform changes to the policy. Because frankly, we could change the policy every month, but is that benefiting us on a monthly basis? I don't know.
Okay. Todd, did you have something?
Yeah, just, I'm real close to having that contractors list together for all the different trades, union and non-union contractors. So I'm real, they could do the work. So I'm real close to having that wrapped up, and I have it to the committee. I would like to see that. I still think that we should be getting this stuff. If we're going to be voting on it, it's going to be coming in front of us. I don't think we should have to make special trips down to Heather's office to view these documents. We're only asking to see who, if anyone that's getting a waiver, we're just asking to see who was asked to bid the job and who actually bid it. We're not asking for any prices, no, we don't want to know if contractor A bid more than contractor B. We just want to know who was asked and who actually put in a price.
But
Nothing.
I feel like we
shouldn't have to make an extra trip.
We worked through this, Todd, at the committee. If we want to go back and have another committee meeting, maybe we could talk about that further.
Yeah.
But just to catch up everybody else, the point you were making about the list, maybe you want to expand on that a little bit. What are you trying to do and why? Because I thought that was a great part of our discussion at the committee level.
Yeah, I'm trying to, because Heather was saying, like, when we have these applications that they want to be able to tell, if we're telling them to use 75% local labor, we should have some kind of a list to provide them of people that use local labor. So I told her I would reach out to all the different building trades, all the different trades out there, and get a list of the union and non-union, so truly get local people, contractors that use local people. And I'm real close to having that completed. Some of them, I'm trying to get everything into the Excel format to make it easier for Heather's team there, but it's some things are just like, it's putting a lot of burden on me because I'm the one trying to get it all into Excel right now. But it's getting there.
This was a surprise to me in that the lists of contractors are essentially statewide. And so for a contractor to understand who do we think is local, we didn't have a list, or we don't have a list yet, but we're very close to getting one. So I thought this was a really positive development. And we should have that in place pretty soon. So that was a positive outcome of that meeting. Is there more on the discussion of construction waivers and the Construction Labor Committee report? I would go back in time just for a second to staff report. And Heather, just in the category of coming attractions, you and I spoke a bit that Southworks is coming up soon.
Yes, I've had several meetings with the Southworks Development Group, looking at their pro formas, their financial analysis. They've been working on their application. So I have been working with them on the pilot structure. This is probably the largest redevelopment project we'll ever see in our lifetimes in this community, so it is a little bit out of the box of our standard tax exemption policy. So we've been working on that and hope to be presenting in November.
And I just wanted to make clear to the IDA that I would like to make sure that we have a very clear understanding of what is that structure and that we're comfortable with it, because again, as Heather said, this will be the biggest decision we probably make as an IDA in any time we're sitting in these seats. So I want us to be very, very comfortable that we're doing what we want to do. Deborah?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, a project of this size, as I understood the presentation that we got very early this year, it's going to be phased in. So are we going to be presented with one package that covers all the phases, and we're just going to approve one phase at a time, or how is this going to work? Or is that the structure that you're talking about?
That's where I want us to have some time to really understand that structure. And Heather's not ready to present that to us yet.
No, I understand that.
But I want everybody to understand we're going to have time to think about that. We're not going to be presented with an application and say, okay, let's send it to public hearing. We're going to take a little bit of time to make sure this all works.
So just as a little bit of background, I have worked with our attorneys that have done a number of multi-phase projects and larger projects in other communities to look at some other pilot structures. I've spent a lot of time sort of poring over their financial projections, the phasing on the project, the approvals that they currently have. So we've used some of these other pilots from other projects or similar kinds of projects to inform some of our discussion over the past several months. And what we're sort of looking at is 3 phases. They do have their environmental approvals all set, and approving a structure that then would be put in place for each phase. Should anything change, and with a project of this size, likely things are going to change, that would trigger them having to come back to the IDA, similar to the 401 East State Street, the BVSHF project has come back a couple of times as they've added a story or it increased the number of units, kind of thing. If there's a substantial change, they would come back.
I was wondering, too, if it would be worthwhile reaching out to IDAs in some larger jurisdictions throughout the state who are more likely to have had projects of this magnitude and see how they handled them.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple on a couple of projects, yeah.
Anybody else? All right, just an update that's, as I said, coming attractions. It's going to be here soon. Next item is minutes approval for our August 19th, 2023 board meeting. Could I get a motion? Deborah moves, Jeff seconds. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, by show of hands, all in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Great. Next item is executive session, and as Heather indicated, we have a couple items we want to discuss regarding pending litigation. And what was the other matter, Heather?
I'd say contract negotiation.
We need to do those as two separate. Can we just say both in one motion?
I believe we can do both in one motion.
So
Yeah.
I'll move to enter executive session to discuss pending litigation and contract negotiation.
All right, could I get a second? Deborah seconds. All right, Duxon? Yes. Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd? Yes. And the chair votes yes, and I just note that we do not plan to take any action after coming out of executive session as an IDA. So why don't we take a couple minutes and we'll shut down the public feed.
Yeah, we're just going to keep the Zoom open so that Russ can participate, and
We'll wait for a wave from up above.